Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and educator Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. This is Season 4, Episode 19. It is November 2nd, which is All Souls Day. Yesterday was All Saints Day, both days of remembrance. We're actually coming off of 4 straight, and I say this in quotes, holidays, as the day before that was, of course, October 31st, which we all know as Halloween, and the day before that was a B-list, maybe C-list holiday, certainly a holiday in my house, October 30th, National Candy Corn Day. Anne, welcome to this All Saints, All Souls episode. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. And I saw that you posted a shout out to National Candy Corn Day. This has been a shared love of Haley and mine, but Haley really takes it to the next level. When I concede your love may surpass mine. Haley, I have not had any candy corn this year, which is remarkable. I've had so much Halloween candy. It scares me because I share an office with 2 other people now. And it's kind of our lure to get people to stop by. It's really funny. It's kind of, I see why people do it. People do enter into the office. Some are unapologetic. Some just pretend like, oh, I'm here to say hi. And then, oh, by the way, I'd love some candy. It's a total spectrum of responses, but none of that has been candy corn.
Well, then you need to share an office with me. I had plenty in my office. I actually brought it into my office so that I wouldn't eat it all at my house, as I did a couple too many times this past month. But Anne, I think you're onto something. Food is a shared language. It's just something that brings people together. And certainly candy does that. I know we held, as we're getting towards, and we're just going to move right into the flame here, what's hot this week. And I know you have on this list, your list, the election. We're really talking about civil discourse at St. Anne's right now. We had a pluralism potluck a couple of weeks ago where we talked about civil discourse and what that looks like at different ages and stages, and the language we're using at school versus the language parents can use at home. And it was a potluck because food really does bring people together, and candy does for sure.
I could not agree more, Haley. I've thought about that. And one of my so it's just rolling it back a minute. One of my friends, who is a Jesuit priest, says when he does the examen, part of it is to go through your day and start with what you're grateful for. And he usually starts with food, something in his day that he enjoyed, because it's usually changing. It's something dynamic. And when somebody drops by, like a colleague did with a hot cinnamon roll, I'm telling you, my attitude, my body language, everything about me changed. It's so true. So a universal language. We may not all agree on what we enjoy,
right?
But it is adventurous. It's novel. It's fun. It's welcoming. It's yummy.
Well, and we talk about the bread of life, and we're not always eating bread. So it's really just that shared
there was fish
food.
Too.
Right. So certainly it is universal. So this week began the trifecta of holidays. Of course, we had Halloween. We're moving into, in our house, Christmas season. But of course, there's Thanksgiving in there too. It's interesting though. I know I've shared earlier, my husband recently took a job with a company that's based in Germany. He just got home from Germany last night. And there is no Thanksgiving in Germany. There is no Thanksgiving really outside of the world. So Christmas season has started there. Yes. They are in full-blown Christmas mode, which I thought was really interesting. Is it only the United States that has this, and Canada, true, that has this kind of midterm holiday, we'll call it, that prevents people from jumping right into the Christmas season in November. So I may look into that. But this is also admission season for me. I have 6 admissions events in the next 6 days. That's a lot. I was prepping for it. And of course, it was just Halloween, All Souls Day, All Saints Day again. But I was putting together some artwork to present or just to have on display at our admissions tables in these events. And they created, it's our first graders decorated a I'm just going to say a skeleton, but it's the skeleton that you think of when you think of Dia de los Muertos. And I learned about them. You may know this. There was an artist named, and I'm going to do the best I can with the name, Jose Guadalupe Posada. And he reimagined what he believed an Aztec goddess to look like as a female skeleton. And that is the rendering that is now known as the Calavera Catrina. That is a very famous, apparently, piece of artwork. The Calavera Catrina is this female Aztec goddess as a skeleton. And as part of this, he talks about todos somos calaveras, which means we are all skeletons. And if you take that meaning a step further, it's saying we are all the same on the inside. And I love this. Our skeletons all look the same. Now, of course, to anthropologists and archaeologists, they can look at a skeleton and tell you where they're from and all of that. But for the most part, human skeletons are all the same. We are all the same on the inside. And I think it really spoke to me. I had never thought of it that way. Of course, skeletons are all the same on the inside. And so celebrating that part of the human in a way that really connects us in a, especially during, again, All Souls Day, All Saints Day, in a part of the world where that is a huge part of their not only religion, but culture, I thought was really neat. And of course, on Halloween night, all the kids are wearing costumes. I wore a costume. And I think it speaks to just, children as well. Children are all different. They come from all different backgrounds. They wear those costumes, but really they're all the same on the inside once you remove that costume. So whatever layer you're taking off, we really are all the same on the inside. And I know that we say that all the time, but I thought that was a great lesson that I clearly needed to hear right now.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I've never heard it. I think there is a proliferation of skeletons. Somebody was like wanting to see the Amazon metrics on the amount of Halloween decor. And in San Francisco, it is like a national holiday. It is everywhere. And it's gotten more so. I don't know if that's true where you live, but to go back to the image of the skeleton, that is so true. We truly are.
We are. And it's a good thing to remember, again, as we move into this week with the election, which is very polarizing. We all know that. We're having conversations at our school. I'm sure you are as well. What does the day after the election look like?
Yes.
If we even know what the day after the election looks like. I think the biggest win would be if we do have a decision and we do know who our next president is. If we know that the day after the election, that I think would surprise many people. But it is a good reminder. We are all the same. It is very polarizing. We have people who feel very strongly on both sides, and we are Faith Fondue. We are Switzerland. We're not talking politics, but in this case, I think we're talking about humanity and just remembering as we move through what will be a very tricky week and coming days, to be thankful. It is the month of Thanksgiving, but also to remember we are all the same on the inside.
Yeah, I agree. And whether it's red or blue, then you hear purple. Whether it's local politics or national politics, there is a lot going on this week. And we have been preparing in our school community for, we don't know.
Right.
But I was recently in Washington, D.C., in our nation's capital, for the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice. I accompanied a government teacher, and this guy is hardcore, loves politics, veteran teacher, accomplished teacher, so just plays and loves the issues and Americans' viewpoints, and is just fascinated by whatever your view is. It was so much fun to just kind of engage. I am a big sports fan, as people know. I have a friend that is a strong sports fan, but he also is he loves politics, and he says, because there's so many similarities, there's sides, there's, winners, losers, there's always drama, there's, justice and injustice, if you will, but the reality of politics. So it was just fun to spend time with this teacher and 12 students who truly are engaged in the matter. So we have a mayoral election in San Francisco, and it's going to be very interesting because the current mayor is, it's not a known if she's going to be reelected, and we have a ranked choice voting system. So there's that. There's a number of propositions. One of the students in the group wrote a very accomplished op-ed for the San Francisco Chronicle. It was great, and he was just so fluid in his speech about politics and his knowledge. It was very inspiring. So even though it's not my area of expertise or forte, I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed just seeing young people who were informed and asked great questions. And
Yes.
they just didn't carry the baggage, so to speak. I mean, they're 18, they're 17. And by baggage, that sounds pejorative, but we all come with agendas,
Mm-hmm.
and we live with economic realities that they don't. So it just was a fun way to participate in a weekend with actually 1,500 other young people.
Well, in a hopeful way as well, to just
Yes,
see
yes.
there is hope. And I see this even with my own children. It's an effort for them to vote. They have to register for the absentee ballot and get the absentee ballot and send the absentee ballot in. And that's not a huge hardship, but it's not as easy as just showing up and voting. But to see how engaged they are and the research that they have done, they're not just voting because we're maybe voting for someone or their friends are voting for someone. We've had real conversations about articles they've read and people they've listened to, and that it does give you hope that there are an engaged next generation who, I don't know, will hopefully do a better job than we did. I don't feel like we've done a bad job, but here we are.
I know. Well, the theme of the IFTJ, Ignatian Family Teaching for Justice, and it wasn't just for Jesuit schools. There were a number of high schools, there were a number of Jesuit colleges and universities, but also local Catholic schools, several from the Bay Area, from all over. So in that way, it's open and inclusive, but the majority, that's within the tradition of kind of a Jesuit schools network. The theme was steadfast hope in precarious times. So just naming the reality
Right.
of the times in which we live, and that things are not necessarily simple. There's a lot of complexity and challenge, and so that theme of hope really did resound for our group. I thought it was definitely inspiring, and it lived up to the name, hopeful.
Great, and very timely for sure as well.
No doubt.
There's also, so we will certainly be praying for our country this week. I know that will be the takeaway, just for peace, and for peace, and for all of those who are voting, and for our candidates, and for everyone who serves our country.
Yes.
There was also a lot to celebrate this week. Are you a Dodgers fan? No, you're a Giants fan. But I would imagine,
really.
Were you rooting for the Yankees or the Dodgers?
So this also happened on the trip. Okay. So we're gonna be really honest here. I placed a sports bet on the Dodgers. And I want to talk about that because there were some unintended consequences, things that I was not expecting to happen. And I blogged about it because I feel so strongly about this. So, in my sports and spirituality class, two things. Number one, I asked my students, I said, my guess is you can name more NFL coaches than congressmen or senators. This proved to be true. So
Ouch.
I am proud of those 12 students that came, knowing that a lot of students are not as engaged politically, and where we all put our resources and interest. Like, hey, like I said, I'm a sports fan too. So I acknowledge that. I'm not throwing any stones. Second, so students are more engaged in sport than potentially politics. Students are very engaged in gambling. There is, in the last few years, I have completely noticed it because it's so accessible with the internet, with your cell phone.
Yep.
I would argue it's probably somewhat destigmatized, but the access is just everywhere, to the point where, I wasn't able to place a bet. I opened a DraftKings account because I needed to see how easy this was. I couldn't even find certain bets because there's so many out there. And in California, you can't place a lot of bets. And so my students were like, well, you just need a firewall. And so they are speaking fluently about how to sports bet.
Yes.
How to gamble on sports. So I do like gambling. I find it entertaining. I'm not a big gambler because part of it is, well, I don't have I don't know. It's my ethic. So that's what I'm going to come back to, my ethic on gambling. So I think gambling is like a controlled substance. There's an age for it. There's a way to approach it. I think people should be thoughtful about it, but you have to have a little bit of self-knowledge and a little bit of warning because it is risky.
And it's addicting.
Completely.
Yes.
We know this. I don't feel like we talk about that a lot. There is sympathy and love and empathy for people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol, and a lot struggle. But I don't hear. Do you hear a lot
No,
about?
but no, but
Yeah,
I'm going to pause there
yeah,
because I don't think we have always had the sympathy and
true.
empathy for understanding the true addictive
I
qualities
agree.
of drugs and alcohol.
I agree. I agree.
At
Yeah,
all. I think
yeah,
that's newer, and I think
yeah,
gambling, because it's a little it's a little behind. I mean, there's been gambling for
yeah.
thousands of years. So I can't say it's
Yes.
behind the times when you're talking about
Yeah.
alcohol
Right.
and drugs. It's right on par there. But I think because it's become more accessible, and you
Yes.
don't have to find a bookie anymore. You can just pull out your phone and, again, create an account, which teenagers should not be able to do until they turn 18 or 21, I believe the age is, but they do.
21. Mhm.
So because it is becoming more accessible, I think in that sense, it's behind the trend of drugs and alcohol, which
Yep.
unfortunately teenagers and young people have had more access to than gambling. I
Yep.
don't think we fully understand or acknowledge. I don't think we fully acknowledge or appreciate the true addictiveness of it.
Yeah.
But again, drugs and alcohol weren't always. I don't think we always
Right.
appreciated that either.
Right. And there are plenty, that of people that live in a reality where the struggle is ongoing. They're not getting how all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I see. So at any rate, um did I was with a friend who is a Yankee fan,
Mm-hmm.
but was bets on a lot of games and said, I'm going to take the Dodgers game one. And I said, well, what's the he said it's minus 140 for the series. And I was like, really? I want in on that. So I placed a bet very timely. And I thought, because I've seen the Dodgers quite a bit, just because they're, Giants rival and based on scheduling. And I thought they're the better, every gamble. I don't know this. I also raised this question. Gambling inherently is a risk. That's the root of the word. So
Right.
do most gamblers think when they place a bet, right? Aren't we going in thinking we are going to win? Or do people really go in with the spirit of like, I don't know? So I will say
Yeah.
this. When I bet on Spain to win the Euro Cup, I considered that a smart game because my father had watched every game in the Euro Cup series. He's retired, like he loves soccer. When I place a bet on a golfer to win the Masters, I no longer think of that as a smart bet because there's just so many players in the field. I usually bet on someone that's hot, that's been playing well, so that part is smart, but it is such a gamble. With a series, Dodgers Yankees, it's one or the other. So I felt like this was a justifiable bet. Part of my ethic is I can afford to lose $100. It's not going to kill me. I'm not going to enjoy it, but I'm thinking I can afford to lose. And I think that's part of the ethic. What can you afford to lose? You
Right.
have to think that way, right?
Right.
What I was not anticipating is that I would find myself cheering for the Dodgers, and that is a problem. I I do not like this team. There I can like name specific players that I usually like eye roll, detest, gross. I found myself 180 cheering for them, believing in them. Now, if they had lost, maybe the rivalry would have gone deeper. So there's all these hypotheticals, but in the future, I see why I bet on them because I actually don't like either team. And so, but I knew it was a high billing and I actually thought it would be a good series and it proved to be, there were a lot of exciting games, although,
Yes. Yes.
you know, people argue who did the Yankees lose or did the Dodgers win?
Doesn't matter. Both.
Right. So part of my ethic is like, I don't know if I would bet, I don't know, betting on a team that is my rival. Like it'd be like betting on USC and then I'd have to cheer for them. I actually don't think I could bet on USC to win because I don't want to cheer for them. And part of my cheering is because I am motivated by the financial gain. I can't lie. I do get really worked up.
So you're not
So
alone there. Interestingly enough, I for as competitive as I am, and maybe it's the uber competitiveness that prevents me from this. I am not a big gambler. I
yeah.
don't love it, and for better or worse, it's not an ethical thing. I don't. I've never really gotten into it. Now, do I play a March Madness pool? Yes, although not one that I have to put money in. I play fantasy football. I do enjoy the game of it,
Okay.
but not not necessarily, none of them really involve anything financial. What I do enjoy are slot machines, and that is a totally
Oh,
different form of gambling. It is not betting anything. However, I only play the nickel slots. I mean, I'm
okay.
really low stakes gambling here.
Okay. Okay.
But I
Yes.
look at it as, okay, I have $20 of nickels. And of course, you
Yes.
don't play with nickels anymore. You play with credits, which kind of takes the fun out of it.
Yes. I know.
And I just know at some point I'm going to probably lose that $20, but it's
Yes.
$20 I paid for an hour of entertainment. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
rationalize it and look
Hmm.
at it in my mind as I am going to pay for this moment of entertainment
Hmm.
and really not expect anything in return. So I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
I truly have never, and I say never in the honest sense. I really don't believe I have. I can't recall a time where I've actually bet money on a sporting event. And again, that has nothing to do with anything personal or ethical. I just really haven't ever done it.
Yeah.
I know my children have, certainly my 22-year-old has, who it's legal for him to do that. It's interesting you use the USC example. Of course, as Notre Dame fans, we're not necessarily USC fans. He will oftentimes bet. He does not bet on his own teams, but he will, if he does bet on a rival team, he views it as a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Either the team that he doesn't care for loses, and that's a win, or the team that he bet on that he doesn't care for wins, and then he benefits financially. So there's so many ways you can look at this.
Sure.
All of it's
Yeah.
probably just rationalizing the fact that we are betting and gambling. But
Hmm.
there is an entertainment factor there that
Yeah.
does, you're right, cause us to be more engaged. You were probably way more engaged in this World Series
Yeah.
because you had the
Yeah.
entertaining stake in it.
Yes. It's true.
It's not right or wrong, it's just where we
Yeah.
are.
No, I mean, you kind of articulated your ethic though in speaking for yourself here about you enjoy the game itself. And that I know several people that don't gamble, they don't enjoy gambling. Like, so that is not their, what would be the word? That's not their, an activity that they enjoy. I enjoy gambling. So I will start with that. And then second, like to name the um, slot machines, you set a limit. It's entertainment for this
Right,
amount. I
right.
want nothing to do with the slot machine because I find it totally passive. Now I know a lot of people, my grandmother, my mom, enjoy slot machines. But to me, part of the enjoyment is this strategy. So I come to the sports book with this belief that I have some knowledge that is going to, right? I'm putting my money on something that I know about and I want to place and see where it goes. Or, I don't play video poker or video blackjack because to me the computer, I don't trust it, whereas at the
Mm-hmm.
table there's a dynamic experience of the other people around me and how they affect it or the dealer. So that's part of what I
Right,
enjoy.
right.
And then for
Interesting.
your son, yeah, like how we bet and how we see the gain or not can all be part of like what guides you to enjoy this experience. So it is a really interesting, I mean, it is a moral issue in the sense of like it can affect people's lives. My mom
Yes.
is here. My mom's mom is here. My grandmother is in this country because my great grandfather lost their farm. They lost the family farm. He was a gambler. He had a gambling
Wow.
problem. the children had to come to the United States to make an income. So I have it in my blood, is what I'm trying to say. And yes, the best of times and the worst of times. And we know, like many moral issues, it can impact the poor in a way. Like I have the ability to lose $100. I'm not saying that cavalier. I'm saying that with a little bit of respect, knowing that for some people, like they might need the $100 to pay their PG&E. I mean, potentially, but that's a whole other road. So it is a fascinating topic. It's not going away. Like I agree with you. It's like something we're going to probably be hearing more about. And I'm glad that today we at least live in a society where people have compassion for drugs and alcohol, but there are many people that don't. And you're right, it wasn't always that way. So it's good to talk about these things.
It
Get
is.
us think.
It is. And then also, as we continue to discuss different moral issues, going back to our gospel and what Jesus says and what the roadmap is for us. And moving on to our spiritual stew, yesterday's gospel on All Saints Day was the Beatitudes. And there was a line in there that just really stuck with me because it's something we're in the process of working on at St. Anne's, or at least it's this part of the year. It's a program we've had for a number of years since my children were there. But one of the lines from the Beatitudes is, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." We have a peacemakers program at St. Anne's School. I think I've mentioned it briefly before, but we train our fourth graders as peacemakers, and we give them mediation skills. We train them on that. They practice it. They discuss it. They are the peacemakers on the playground. And for various reasons, it's been a topic of conversation for the past few weeks, and it's really made me think about the importance of starting young with children in terms of foundations, moral values, education. You certainly work in a high school. I used to work in a high school. I love that level. If I'm ever going to teach, it's going to be at least high school, if not college. That's the age I think I would do well with in a classroom. But there's something really powerful about working with 9 and 10-year-olds in fourth grade, or I spent some time this morning with first, second, and third graders just at a really young age, exposing them in a very age appropriate way to these huge life issues of peacemaking, of mediation, and just giving them that foundation when they are open to it, when they don't necessarily have some of their own experiences that may or may not affect their beliefs. But just giving them these experiences at a young age to set the stage. I often say, and you may disagree with me with this, so please do feel free to. There are often times I share that sometimes high school's too late. You can certainly have an impact on, again, as you're discussing theology or moral issues, but so much of where the foundation of those topics, they stem from the early ages. So it's one of the reasons, again, I could never teach this age, but I certainly love being part of laying that foundation that then you and our high school and of course beyond allows them to, I feel like we're the roots and you are the seeds that and the nourishment that's allowing students to grow. And I saw that even this morning. My husband and I spent this morning at an organization volunteering with my school through St. Anne's. So we had younger kids there where we were filling backpacks for children who are in situations of abuse where they need to be removed immediately from their home, from their parent, from their guardian, from the abusive situation. And they don't have time to go home and pack, or they don't have time to grab their toothbrush. And so these are backpacks with 2 or 3 days of everything they could possibly need. I happen to do infant bags, so diapers, pacifier bottles, onesies, things like that. And it was really impactful for the students to see the basic needs that some other peers of theirs don't have. And, again, they're not easy conversations to have, but life isn't easy either. And so many of us do have the $100 that we can bet, or do have the diapers, or do have the books and the clothes. And it's I find it a very meaningful
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
experience that we do have at our school, and I know you do
Yeah.
too.
Well, I want to respond to the idea of starting young and working, yeah, with young people. But second, Haley, just hearing that story about these children in these situations, how do they find these children?
So
Is
so
my
that
question. That's a practical question. I'll go back to the other one.
No, it is a practical question, and that was brought up briefly. And, again, we were with young kids. So some of the
Yeah.
questions the adults wanted to know and ask
Yeah.
and hear the answers for perhaps weren't always necessarily appropriate to share with young children. But they have a very personal network
Okay.
within the community of support. And so they're working with one another. They have relationships with social
Yeah.
workers, with caseworkers,
Okay.
with social workers in the hospitals. Perhaps if there is a child being born to an incarcerated parent, to immediately the child's mother's going into labor. We have about 3 hours to get this backpack, get them to the foster family as soon as this child is born. So it's a very intentional network where they
Mm.
communicate with other
Okay. Yeah.
support organizations.
Yeah. Well, praise God for those organizations. I mean, really,
Amen. That
it
is the
is
work
so
of God.
humbling
Yes.
to hear that.
Yes.
Yes. But, as you were speaking and raising that question about, inculcating at a young age service, prayer,
Mm-hmm.
a life of faith, I couldn't help but draw a sports analogy. If you grow up on a swim team, I never had a fear of. I, I remember a friend who was like, "Oh, you can do a flip turn," and I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" You learn that when you're a certain age, and it's what you do. Or, I I didn't really take to skiing as I learned in my 20s, and I'd always wished I had learned when I was really young. So I think when you are young, it just becomes almost second nature. I don't know if that's fair. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
still have to learn things, and not everybody does. But, for the golfer that I play with who grew up playing golf, they have a different approach to the game. I can play golf. I do play golf, but it is like almost like it's inherent almost at that point. So
That's and when you say that, and that's very true in terms of, so you were born learning to swim, you have a love of
yeah,
the water, but that doesn't mean that in high school, let's say, you didn't have to refine the technique. And
yeah,
right, you're not automatically going to be a great swimmer because you had that strong foundation. My guess is that's true for prayer, for faith, for morals, for ethics. Just because
yeah,
you're given that foundation as a child doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't need to be refined or grown.
yeah.
They say languages are the same. Children who
Yes,
are exposed to
right.
languages at a young age are more prone to having that be part of
Yeah. It's the
their
brain
growth.
development too. That
Yes.
was, I think there's something about brain development and at a certain age where the door is open to learn multiple languages. I hadn't really thought about that in terms of the language of faith too. So
Something to chew
interesting
on.
question. Yes, I know that's what the stew does. Well, I am glad you mentioned the Beatitudes because I wanted to reference the chapter right before in Matthew 4. Jesus calls the apostles.
Mhm.
And recently, I've just had to be really clear on this. It's not the disciples, it's the apostles. And the apostles, there's 12 of them, and they're called by name, and the word means to be sent. And you and I, we're all disciples are people who do the work of Jesus. So a disciple would be a student, but it's also a follower of Jesus. So apostles are disciples. Not all disciples were apostles,
Okay.
squares and rectangles, right?
Yeah.
But one of the pieces in The Chosen, and I need to find out if there's a scriptural basis for it, but it was referenced at the Ignatian Family Teach-In, the show with The Chosen is a series on the Bible and the life of Christ. Jesus puts Simon the Zealot with Matthew, the two men of the 12 apostles who have the most different political views. And they are called to work together because they're united in a common ministry. And I thought that is such a symbol for today's society. When we began
Yes.
talking about polarizing times, of course, times were polarizing then. That's why Jesus was killed, right? There's
Right.
all kinds of leadership dictate, empire occupied territory, whatnot. But to have Matthew and Simon the Zealot working together in a common ministry, what a great image for us to carry. So whether we're red or blue, in, our voting and whatnot, if we could only just in some way for important topics work together. Matthew's gospel reminds us of that.
Absolutely. Well, and as we look at our takeaways this week, and what we want this week to look like, what we hope this week looks like in the melting pot, it's going to be an interesting week. Many people call this the most important election in our nation's history. I feel like I've heard that the last several elections, but
yes,
I do think there's so much of what we talked about in today's episode that will be great for us to remember. One, our skeletons. We are all the same on the inside. And I truly hope people remember that as we move through the week. And just remembering that we are all called to react and to be the people and the persons that we can be. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm really going to struggle this week. I think many of us are, and not so much myself. I tend to think of myself as an American and a patriot first. I will accept whoever wins this election. Yeah. They will be the president. Yeah. You will never hear me say they're not my president. They are our president. So yeah. I don't see this as a struggle for myself in many ways. But I do recognize that it will be. And so I want to I want to throw that out there. And I also know that that's a privilege I have as well, is, perhaps this won't, well, I'm not going to go there. So I will be praying for our country and our voters and for peace.
Yeah, those are always good prayers. And my takeaway, and this is something I know you live by, appreciate, and support, the reminder of perspective, but history is such a great teacher.
Yes.
So being in Washington, D.C., we go to Ford's Theater, and the place where Lincoln was shot and killed, and people thought he was a tyrant.
Yes.
This great American leader. And John Wilkes Booth, like what he yells when he jumps on the stage, it references Julius Caesar. Like, we feel like it's so imminent what is happening right now, but we have to have that perspective that people throughout history have felt that same way.
True.
And we are striving for a more perfect union, and that is an ongoing struggle. Yes, our history books are going to write some very interesting things about this time. January 6th would be an example, right? Just the events surrounding that, whoever gets elected, and just what either president represents.
Right.
It's going to be close. So it doesn't represent the entire nation. It's like we are in many ways a nation divided. There's no doubt about that. But history helps us to kind of make sense that other times have been somewhat similar.
We've been here before, right?
We've made it, and we will just hope for peace in the process.
Yes.
And like hope in steadfast hope in precarious times. So keep doing the work.
Amen.
Grin and bear it if you need to.
Right. And I do think that's a great perspective. Of course, as a history major, I love hearing that, because you're right. We've been a house divided, and that is not new. That's 150 years old. Now, some people would say we should have gotten over that and moved past that, and I don't disagree with that. But you're right. We are not in a new place right now necessarily. We've been fighting these battles for a long time, and the whole idea of a more perfect union, in terms of just ourselves and being perfect people of faith, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
We are not perfect. If we were perfect, there would have been no need for Jesus to die for our sins. And so that ideal of perfect doesn't ever really happen, but certainly striving for that is something we can all strive to do. Amen. Anne, I hope you have a great week. I hope you get some sleep. I know you will have lots to talk about in your classes, and I look forward to connecting soon, talking soon, and regrouping in the next stage of what this world looks like.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Well, we never run. That's the thing about politics, right? Just like sports, there's no shortage of drama. There's plenty to talk about. We'll learn a lot about ourselves.
Yes.
We'll make mistakes, but we seek God's grace along the way. So until next time, thanks, Haley.
Thanks, Anne.